Hey, Adam here, and welcome back. We've covered many disappearances on this channel, spanning from strange, to suspicious, to outright bizarre. There's over an hour's worth of disappearances in this video that I've covered over the last few years, all from various national parks around the world. Let's begin by going back in time to 1948, Mount Rainier National Park. "17-year-old Elizabeth Eyrault disappeared on the 13th of September 1948. On that day, she was on a skiing trip with 3 friends on Mount Rainier. As they were ascending the mountain, Elizabeth reportedly became tired and rested for a while at Whitman Glacier, while her friends continued on their ascent. This was around the 8,200 foot level, and she had agreed with the others to wait in place while they came back down to her. However, when her friends returned to Whitman Glacier, Elizabeth was no longer there. What her friends did find though were ski tracks leading down the mountain, and as they began to follow them, eventually they petered out and weren't discoverable anymore. I'm not sure exactly what that means in terms of the tracks coming to an end, but here is the direct quote. "Elizabeth's companions reported ski tracks leading downward, but due to snow surface conditions were unable to follow them. After the tracks became unfollowable, whatever that then looks like, 2 of the friends remained at the tracks, while the 3rd left to get help, and the official search was on. 2 rescue parties of the US Park Rangers plan to continue a search for Elizabeth Eyrault, who was reported lost on the snow-covered slopes of Mount Rainier. Search operations were halted by darkness without trace of the missing woman, who became separated from 2 companions late Sunday. The group of friends said that they planned to spend Saturday night at Summerland. Early Sunday, they started to climb to the top of Little Tahoma Peak, 11,170 feet in height. Miss Eyrault became tired and remained to rest of Whitman Glacier while her companions continued their climb. At 6 PM Sunday, they returned to the 8,200 foot level where they had left Elizabeth and could not locate her. It's interesting in this instance that they found evidence of Elizabeth's direction of travel, but even the professionally trained searchers couldn't locate her initially. It took me a while to find an update on Elizabeth, and there weren't many reports after the initial disappearance, but thankfully she was found. Under the heading, "Daughter of Navy Captain is found unharmed," the Montana Standard reported this. Elizabeth was found Tuesday unharmed after 2 days and nights alone on rugged Mount Rainier. Meanwhile, a search was in progress for 2 of her companions who apparently left their campsite in search of her. Park officials said that they weren't worried about them, but wanted them to know that Elizabeth had been found. The authorities stated that she was found over 5 miles away from the point of her disappearance and that she was cold and hungry, but otherwise in good physical condition. Unfortunately, there were never any statements made by Elizabeth in regards to what happened. It was never made clear why she left in the first place. It's also curious that if she wanted to descend, for whatever reason, she didn't go back the way they came up. It's just odd in some sense that she would agree to remain in place and then for unknown reasons she travelled in a completely different direction to which the group had taken and that she was familiar with. Whatever the case may be, at least Elizabeth was found safely. On the 9th of October 1949, 2 students known as Bruce Gerling and David Devitt disappeared in the Rocky Mountains National Park. Similar to Joe, something also seems to have gone awry around the Bear Lake area. A search was started Tuesday the 11th for 2 Colorado A&M college students missing on a mountain hike since Sunday. Searchers from the college and Rocky Mountain National Park combed the Bear Lakes area near Estes Park for the pair. The students went on an outing with 40 members of the Aggies Hiking Club Sunday, 11 of the party drove to Grand Lake to hike to Bear Lake from the west. At the Grand Lake, Bruce and David were with 9 other members of the group, and while the other 9 continued on their way to Bear Lake to meet with the rest, Bruce and David stopped at a shelter cabin. The pair were unfortunately not realised as missing until the day afterwards, when the rest of the group returned to campus. Interestingly, the hikers did say that on their hike they were hit by a snowstorm, but felt that the missing pair would be okay through it because they were both warmly clothed and had food with them. The park rangers immediately headed to the cabin that Bruce and David had stopped at. But upon arrival, they quickly noted that there was no sign of them inside nor anywhere in the immediate surroundings of the cabin. It was then realised that they may have had an issue of some magnitude on their hands now. Because they had been reported missing late, it meant that they had now spent 3 nights in freezing cold temperatures, and this is when Army mountaineers were called in. Army mountaineers and trained alpinists were called into the search Wednesday for 2 students missing among the icy crags of the Continental Divide. Rocky Mountain National Park officials had little hope the pair would be found alive after 3 nights of sub-zero weather and howling winds which froze hands and feet of the searchers. To make matters worse, when they were initially reported missing late on Monday, the rangers said that the call couldn't have come at a worse time because a heavy snowstorm had closed in on the area. Interestingly, Bruce and David had seen the rest of the group set off, so they certainly knew which direction they were supposed to travel. It was also stated that the trail from the Grand Lake to Bear Lake was clear and shouldn't have been something that was easily strayed away from. With that, the search headquarters was set up at Bear Lake, and many searchers fanned out, travelling back towards the Grand Lake. As I'm sure you can imagine, this search wasn't working, and what was quite surprising to the search group was that they weren't finding anything at all. There were no signs of their presence, and the searchers really had no idea where they were, or where they could even have gone to. No trace of the 2 was found, and Wednesday, a call for help was sent to Camp Carson, Army Training Center at Colorado Springs. An officer and 14 picked men from the 14th Regimental Combat Team were dispatched to the scene. University of Colorado Mountain Rescue Specialists offered their services, but Professor Charles Hutchinson was asked by rangers to stand by to replace tiring men in the 5 groups working Wednesday morning. Among the 5 search groups, 2 of them were sent from Bear Lake to cover the other trails to the Grand Lake. Another group headed for Tyndall Glacier at the base of Flat Top. Another along a canyon north of the mountain towards the A&M's Mountain Club, which Bruce and David were hoping to be pledged to. None of the groups found anything. As the search was drawing to a close that day, some members were not ready to call it off just yet. A specially trained group of mountain troopers, forest rangers, and 5 Colorado A&M students who refused to give up set out to retrack the Bear Lake area in search for the 2 Aggie students. The 2 missing students became separated from a college hiking group and became lost in the rugged, heavily wooded area near the lake, which has been subject to deep snow and freezing temperatures. Just to clarify, the majority of those searching at this point did in fact believe that they were looking for bodies. There weren't many that actually believed that they could have held out for this time. Chief Forest Ranger Barton Herschler, who is directing the intensive search, said the area where the students are lost is so dense that it might be necessary to search and research the same trails and paths several times. The 5 students, last of some 50 college hikers who participated in the fruitless search, were to go over the immediate Bear Lake area again today. The climbing is so rugged that the other classmates of the 2 missing students had to drop out and rest. The following day, we get some interesting reports and statements made by Chief Ranger Barton Herschler. An intensive search of the 12,300-foot flat-top mountain has failed to reveal any trace of Bruce and David. We are just groping. We've been over all the trails twice from end to end. We've gone over every conceivable path they might have taken. High winds Sunday night, Monday and Tuesday have piled 4 and 5 foot snowdrifts in crevices and between rocks. If anyone fell in any of those places, we wouldn't know, Herschler said. To this day, Bruce and David have never been found, so that might suggest it was unlikely that they'd fallen in the crevices, because you'd like to think that they'd have been discovered by now. That is, of course, presuming that they didn't fall into a place that was borderline undiscoverable. Aside from that, given that Barton said that all of the trails had been searched twice from top to bottom, one question that might need poking at is, did they leave the trail, and why would they do that? There can only really be 3 scenarios here. Either this was a total accident and they'd lost the trail. Earlier comments made by others perhaps suggest that this is unlikely because it was stated that the trail was clear. If they hadn't simply gotten lost, is it possible that they could have encountered an animal which they were wary of and tried to stray away from it, becoming lost? It's important to say that there was absolutely no evidence at all found of animal predation, so this is unlikely. Unless they were pushed from the trail, got lost, and the animal lost interest too. Or they may have come across another person or group that they were unsure of, and again were non-physically pushed from the trail in an effort to leave. Again, this is speculation land because there is no evidence of third-party involvement. Nothing resembling a struggle or anything like that was ever found. I'm not really sure what else would cause them to stray from the trail. I suppose one final scenario might be that something in the forest piqued their interest, and they then got lost while investigating. It's not at all clear what happened to them. The search was suspended on the 17th of October that year, with the Tucson Daily Citizen reporting this. The search for 2 Colorado students lost for 8 days in the snowy heights of the Rocky Mountain National Park has been abandoned. The organised search effort was dropped after a conference between Colorado A&M officials, parents of the boys, park rangers, an Army search detachment from Camp Carson, and members of the school hiking club. Dean of Students J.C. Clevenger said a further search would not be worthwhile. Hope of finding the 2 students alive is no longer held. Bruce's father, William Gerling, had an understandably difficult time in letting go and accepting this situation. He continued searching alone and with a small party for almost a year after the disappearance took place. William Gerling of Phoenix had given up the search today for his son, Bruce, 21, who became lost in the Rocky Mountain National Park. The elder Gerling has searched the park almost continually since the 2 youths became separated from a hiking party. Like those before him in the initial search, William never found anything, and as mentioned, Bruce and David have never been found. On the 12th of July 1966, 8-year-old Dennis Eugene Johnson disappeared in Yellowstone National Park. The Johnson family consisted of the parents, their 3 daughters, and Dennis, who had planned what was supposed to be a relaxing trip to the park. However, this journey would end up being a nightmare for the family. The family themselves often made trips and spent time in the outdoors and loved being with one another. All sources indicate that all of the children had been taught basic survival skills, and Dennis had prior wilderness experience whilst tagging along on hunting trips. On the day in question, the family had driven from Canyon Junction to the northeast, where they had arranged to have a picnic together. It's not completely clear what had happened at this point. Some sources indicate that Dennis and one of his sisters were playing nearby, while others indicate that Mary, the sister in question, wandered off. But from what I can gather, it appears that Dennis and Mary wandered off from the picnic area up a nearby hill. Sources don't seem to give a specific time frame here, but it appears that shortly after the pair wandered up the hill, Dennis would return alone. It seems to me that much time can't have passed, as the parents were not concerned about their departure together. However, upon Dennis's return, he was asked where Mary had gone to, which he replied that he didn't know. According to the Oakland Tribune, the Chief Park Ranger's office reported that a younger sister wandered off when the Johnson family stopped at a picnic area along the highway 1/4 mile north of Canyon Junction, Tuesday afternoon. The father and Dennis went separate directions to look for the girl. The father found the missing girl, but Dennis vanished. Specifically, it was another camper who had found Mary and had taken her to a nearby ranger station and was then brought back to the family. At this point, the father travelled in the direction of Dennis to tell him that all was well, however, he couldn't locate his son. Nervous now, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson began to search the area in an effort to retrieve their son. This search was unsuccessful, and the family appealed to other hikers and campers nearby who assisted in the search until 4 p.m. No trace of Dennis could be found, and the National Park Service were made aware of the situation. It's important to note that Dennis went missing at around an 8,000 foot elevation, and that the mountainous area is rugged, and it was suspected that Dennis really shouldn't have been able to get very far. The Corpus Christi Times gave us an indication of the search effort with their report on the 15th of July 1966, 3 days after the initial disappearance. Yellowstone National Park. No trace was found yesterday by around 50 men in a ground and air search for an 8-year-old California boy missing since Tuesday. Rangers said the search would resume Friday. Night temperatures in the park have been down to about 44 degrees. Dennis Johnson, son of Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, became separated from his family while hunting for his sister. The girl was found, but in the meantime, Dennis had vanished. The search only intensified from there, and soon over 100 employees of the National Park Service were deployed to find Dennis. Helicopters, specialist search dog teams, and professional trackers were all brought in to find him. Reports indicate that the searchers, and especially the trackers, were left baffled because they were completely expecting to find his footprints, but none were located anywhere in the area. 8 days into the search, the Lovington Daily Leader reported this. Experienced park rangers were to retrace their routes today in an attempt to find a young boy 8 days ago in the Yellowstone area. "We are still hopeful," said a ranger, but so far there have been no definitive trace of the 8-year-old. As many as 125 men have gone over the area, walking shoulder to shoulder through the forest areas and climbing along the rim of the Grand Canyon. Late Tuesday, the boy's father, 2 uncles, and his grandfather were continuing their own search for the missing lad. After 2 more days of searching, hope seemed to drain from the situation. The Logan Herald-Journal reported this. The search was scheduled to continue today in Yellowstone National Park, where Dennis has been missing for 10 days. Park officials held little hope that they would find the 60-pound 8-year-old safe. No trace of the youth has been found by hundreds of searchers who have blanketed a 100 square mile area since the boy was reported missing. During the time, the searchers were perplexed because nothing at all was turning up. The helicopters never made any sightings of Dennis or where he could have been, and the search dogs never picked up his scent at any point during the search, which many claimed to be unusual. Naturally, the possibility of Dennis being taken came up around a week into the search, which is roughly the time of FBI involvement into the case. The extent of their involvement is unknown, and it's not clear if they had any theories of their own. One searcher made the comment, it was almost as if Dennis had been snatched from the face of the earth. The official search lasted for 2 weeks, but after no evidence or clues presented itself, the search was called off. Dennis's family, however, continued their own unofficial search, but they never found Dennis or any indication of where he might have gone. This trip was a disaster from the get-go. First, Dennis and Mary had somehow gotten separated before Mary went missing. Thankfully, she was then successfully located some distance away from the picnic area. Meanwhile, Dennis goes missing without leaving a footprint or even a trace behind as to where he might have gone. This was a very troubling disappearance, and there are no real answers, and in fact, we're left with almost every question unanswered. Why couldn't professional trackers locate anything to indicate where he might have gone? No footprints were in the area. The dogs never found his scent. Why? Does this indicate that he wasn't even there anymore? The general feeling was that Dennis should surely have been found, but that was obviously not the case. What happened to Dennis Johnson and where did he go? "73-year-old John Devine, an avid hiker from Sequim, had planned to hike in the Olympic National Park on the 7th of September 1997. John's loved ones stated that he was very experienced with the outdoors and had spent much of his time hiking and in earlier life, camping. On this particular visit to the park, John had planned to hike up Mount Baldy, which stands at approximately 6,800 feet. The trail he was said to have chosen was particularly steep and somewhat rugged, known as the Maynard Burn Trail. It was along this trail that John is thought to have disappeared, and after failing to return to his family, he was reported missing. Unfortunately, details of the search were somewhat overshadowed as during the hunt, one of the search helicopters crashed just outside the park and 3 didn't make it. This accident actually left safety investigators baffled as they had no idea why it had happened. On the 15th of September 1997, the Sitka Daily Sentinel reported this. George Peterson, a National Transportation Safety Board investigator, said that he would start interviewing witnesses today in part to find out about the weather at the time of the crash. While the weather will not be the main focus, it could be a major player in the incident. The helicopter was certified for search and rescue operations. Peterson continued, facts about the crash are frustratingly few. This is very, very peculiar. Usually, there are clues, a radio call from the pilot, or someone who saw something. But in this case, there has been nothing. With the number of people in that area at the time, somebody should have seen something, but if they did, and somebody has that information, they aren't sharing it with us. Now I do believe initially that the search for John was fairly large and many agencies, law enforcement, volunteers and the park rangers were all over that mountain, as were other helicopters and dog teams, but none of them could find a trace. Unfortunately, at this stage, all articles and older newspapers that I've been scouring through seem to focus on the helicopter, but the Sitka Daily Sentinel did say this. Search teams still have no idea where to find John Devine, who failed to return to his camp near Mount Baldy last Saturday night, said Gary Gissel of the National Park Service. The search has been scaled back at this time, though rangers will continue to check for clues as part of routine patrols of the Mount Baldy area. A Park Service spokeswoman, Kat Hoffman, said that the search will never be cancelled. While well-intentioned, that remark was not upheld, and eventually the search for John Devine ended inconclusively, and as far as I can tell, a reason for the helicopter accident was not provided. Though I will say that if you're interested in that, then it might be worthwhile to research it. However, during my reading, I never came across any kind of reasoning. A piece of information that I did manage to find was that shortly after the disappearance, the weather took a turn for the worse, and park officials said that the chance of a successful search dropped sharply as snow and cold swept through the mountainous area of the park. Search Coordinator Sergeant Don Kelly of Clallam County Sheriff's Office said, "If he was walking around up there, we would have found him by now." Over 20 years later, and no remains or even a trace of John has ever been found, which unfortunately adds him to the list of unsolved disappearances in the national park system. Gilbert Mark Gilman, 47 years old at the time of his disappearance, was known to be a very tough man and possessed a lot of hiking experience in wilderness areas. Gilbert was a paratrooper in the US military and had served on active duty in Panama, East Africa and Israel. According to StrangeOutdoors.com, he had combat experience with the 82nd Airborne and received 2 Bronze Stars. He also had degrees from the London School of Economics, Union College in New York and Solvay Business School in Brussels. So he had brains as well as brawn. He also worked as a civilian contractor for a year in Iraq and was an interrogator fluent in Arabic, Russian and Chinese. Gilbert worked for the United Nations before he came to Washington State to manage the 2004 congressional campaign for Sandy Matheson, director of the State Department of Retirement Systems. He worked under Matheson as Deputy Director of the Retirement Systems Department since April 2005, advising her on national and local pension issues. On the 25th of June, Gilbert was supposed to meet with Sandy in Spokane, Washington, but he never arrived and he was reported missing that Sunday. The Centralia Chronicle covered this incident in the days after it took place. On the 28th, they stated, Gilman's 2005 Silver Thunderbird convertible had apparently been parked at the ranger station since Saturday, a ranger told Thurston County Sheriff's Chief Deputy Dan Kimball. The ranger, Sandy Lustig, said she remembered the car's arrival because it was playing loud music. She recalled there was just one man in the car who fit Gilman's description. Now it's understood that Gilbert had planned to hike the trails surrounding the Staircase Ranger Station, but something must have gone terribly wrong as he was never seen again. The park spokeswoman, Kath Hoffman, said, Gilman, who recently moved to Northwest from New York, was described as being in good health with limited overnight hiking skills. She said, it looks like he went out for a walk Saturday, but no one has seen him since. Law enforcement made a search of Gilbert's home, but found nothing out of the ordinary. The search in the park began quickly and was launched by land and air. The Central Chronicle gave an update on the incident the following day where they stated, more than 40 searchers with 4 dog teams searched Wednesday along 3 main trails out of the Staircase Ranger Station near Hoodsport. They were aided by a helicopter and a fixed-wing aircraft provided by the State Patrol Aviation Section. The plane was outfitted with infrared sensors that enabled it to detect heat signatures on the ground. The search covered around 30 to 35 square miles. No clues have been found to indicate Gilman's possible direction of travel. Gilbert's disappearance left everyone feeling on edge as they weren't sure what happened. He was described as being in good shape and athletic. Not only that, but Gilbert did not plan a strenuous hike, but more of a stroll as an opportunity to take pictures of the park. The search effort was extensive and those involved worked tirelessly, but after no clues or information presented itself, the hunt was scaled down. Backwood professionals, trackers, law enforcement, volunteers, dogs, helicopters, nor the park rangers could find any trace of Gilbert. The park spokesman said, we've reached the limits of what we can do. The Park Service and all involved spent over 5,000 hours combing the land for him, but ultimately to no avail. Kat Hoffman also said something that some found unusual. We've explored both the logical and the more remote scenarios of what Mr. Gilman may have done. Decisions he may have made and the routes he may have chosen, but none of them produce results. We found nothing to help determine where he might have gone. Gilbert's family and searchers alike were left astonished at the lack of understanding as to what may have happened. There was no sign of a struggle, no ripped clothing, equipment, no remains, no scent, and nothing trackable. The family left an upsetting statement saying that they could not believe that he had just gone missing on a casual afternoon hike in the national park. His mother said that he had his laundry in his car, which he had planned to do when he returned home. So what happened to Gilbert Mark Gilman? Given that he had experience in the wilderness, perhaps not with camping, but certainly with hiking, it's unlikely that he had just wandered off the trail and gotten lost. It's worth pointing out that the trails around the station are well marked as far as I can understand from various reports. It was a disturbing disappearance that left searchers wondering just what took place. According to SeattleTimes.com, Anchorage, Alaska, the woman believed to have fallen overboard from a cruise ship into frigid Alaska waters was 45-year-old Amber Malkuch of Washington State, Alaska State Troopers said late Monday. Amber was last seen at approximately 12:30 a.m. on the 3rd of August 2009 when she ordered room service. At this time, the vessel was near Alaska's Douglas Island and there was nothing to indicate that anything was wrong. It was thought that she had finished up with her room service and had then gone to bed. However, when a travelling companion realised that she was missing, the alarm was raised on the morning of the 3rd. The vessel was well within the boundaries of the Glacier Bay National Park at this point and was approximately 75 miles northwest of Juneau. The state troopers were quickly notified and the search was underway. Both ships and helicopters were deployed over the area. According to ArlingtonTimes.com, Amber Malkuch's body has been found after she went missing from a cruise ship in Alaska between the evening of August 2nd and the morning of August 3rd, but much remains unknown about the circumstances of her passing. The Arlington Times state that the body was located at approximately 4:30 p.m, 12 miles northwest of where she was last seen. Specifically, her body was found on the west side of Douglas Island. The Alaska State Troopers boarded the ship on the 4th and reviewed all available footage but didn't make a statement right away. The cruise firm Holland America did, however, which angered the state troopers. The Arlington Times reported that Holland America spokesperson Sally Andrews said this: "Based on evidence and information to date, it does not appear to be foul play. From what we have seen to date, it appears to have been an intentional disappearance." In response to this, Alaska State Troopers spokeswoman Megan Peters said that the troopers were not yet willing to conclusively point to a cause. She said that the coroner is yet to come to a conclusion. "We still have to do our investigation and we're not going to make any guesses at this time." After some time to process what had happened, according to SeattlePie.com, the state troopers said that they have no idea how Holland America could have come to that conclusion so quickly, and were shocked when they made the announcement because investigators were still baffled as to what took place. Megan Peters continued, "We're the people actually looking into the exact cause. We're the ones doing the interviews and looking at the evidence. If we haven't been able to make a determination, how can the cruise ship line, who are not trained in this area?" It's clear that the cruise line had gotten under the skin of the troopers with their claims before the investigation was anywhere near its conclusion. There seems to have been a fairly controversial debate that took place afterwards, with some, including Holland America, arguing that it must have been intentional. Others arguing that it was accidental and that she must have fallen, while others were stating that a third party must have been responsible. It's not completely clear why the crews immediately jumped to the idea that she must have wanted to have fallen in, as there was no evidence to point in that direction. Here's a quote from the family. "We, as Amber's family, are deeply saddened. She was a loving mother, daughter, sister, niece and cousin who had a very kind and generous nature. We will all miss her terribly, as will her many friends. We recognise that there has been a great deal of speculation as to the nature of her passing. Knowing Amber as we do not believe that this was intentional. Although no one will ever know what actually occurred the night Amber disappeared from the ship, we nonetheless believe that it was of an accidental nature. Thank you to all who have expressed your concern and condolences." Effectively, the family denied that this was an intentional act, and it was only the cruise line's word pointing in that direction. This led many to believe that it must have been completely accidental. However, this had its own problems among readers. In an article on the nationalparkstraveler.org, one commenter wrote, "I don't see any way a person can just fall overboard. I have been on 8 cruises and 4 different cruise lines. The rails are between waist and chest high." The Alaska State Troopers said that the cruise line only allowed them on board the vessel one time to investigate, and many found that unusual. Ultimately, there doesn't seem to be any real answers here, but the family maintain that they do not believe that this was intentional. Why was the cruise line so eager to point in that direction, and why did they only allow the troopers on board once to investigate? What do you think? 2 similar situations seem to take place 9 years later. Unfortunately, the names of both don't seem to have been released, so the missing men shall be referred to as John Doe. The first disappearance took place on the 10th of July 2018 when a passenger of 73 years was reported to have gone overboard early that morning from the 7 Seas Mariner. According to cruiselawnews.com, the cruise ship was returning to Vancouver from a cruise port in Alaska. The ship was sailing to Victoria on the 10th day of an 11-day Alaska cruise which began in Vancouver on June the 30th. The cruise ship apparently first realised that the passenger had gone overboard when the ship was just north of Cape Flattery at the northwestern tip of Washington State's Olympic Peninsula. Once more, we seem to have another situation where the comments from the cruise line got under the skin of the authorities investigating. The captain of the ship told the Coast Guard that video footage showed John jumping into the sea from the 8th deck balcony at 4:15 am. Upon discovering this, the ship turned around northwest and sailed in search of John. The Coast Guard, however, stated this: "In previous post, the word jump was used, however, we have no indication of why or how the individual went overboard. Investigation will help determine what happened. Again, we have no clear information on what's led him to going overboard. Crews are actively searching at this time." The Coast Guard obviously took issue with the implication that he had jumped, and since the CCTV footage was not released, I can only imagine that John was not seen jumping but falling between decks. Since otherwise there would not be a debate on how he went over in regards to falling or jumping, as that would be clear. So the word jumped could be interchangeable with pushed or fallen given one's own speculation on what took place. The Seattle Times stated this: "The 73-year-old man's wife said I was awakened around 4:30 am Tuesday by a breeze coming from the balcony door cracked open and discovered him missing." According to CBC.ca, the US Coast Guard used several surface vessels and at least one aircraft to search for the man who was travelling on an 11-day cruise to Alaska. Tuesday afternoon, they recovered him unresponsive from the water and transferred him to emergency workers waiting on shore. He had passed at the Olympic Medical Center. The Coast Guard repeated that they have no indication of how the individual went overboard. On the 13th of July 2018, 69-year-old John Doe, a passenger on board a Holland America cruise ship, went overboard in the Glacier Bay National Park. The press stated that John was reported missing at 3:50 p.m. that day when he failed to attend a medical appointment on board the ship. The Park Service said that it is unclear if the man had actually gone overboard, while the KTUU reported that he must have gone overboard sometime on Friday morning. The Park Service was notified at 7:30 p.m. that day when a ship-wide search failed to locate the missing man. The Park Service and the US Coast Guard deployed ships and aircraft to scour the 65-mile area along the Glacier Bay where he was believed to have gone overboard. The nationalparkstraveler.org stated that the Park Service suspended the search that Saturday night after being unable to find any trace of him in the water or along the bay. National Park Service Public Information Officer Matthew Cahill said that there were a lot of private vessels in the bay that were participating, and then there were the charters and the day tour boats as well. "We had a minimum of 2 Park Service vessels at any time during the search inside and right outside the mouth of Glacier Bay." The Coast Guard also released a similar statement, essentially saying that their search efforts had also ended inconclusively. The Park Service and the Coast Guard worked together on determining drift patterns and where they believed he should have ended up, but said that he was not where they had expected him to be. Cahill said, "The Coast Guard provided us with probability maps based on the currents and tidal motion. We searched the shorelines and waterways from Beardsley entrance area right in the upper part of Sitakaday Narrows inside the mouth of Glacier Bay. Out of the bay too, including Pleasant Island and Lemuria Island, the 2 islands that are just outside, east and west of the mouth of Glacier Bay." A statement by the Holland America line stated that CCTV footage showed that the man went overboard early that morning at 6:45 am. However, this time they made no comment on how the man went overboard, nor did the authorities. Interestingly, unlike the other two passenger disappearances, the FBI made the ship dock that Sunday and they began their own investigation into the event. Though this remains secretive and I can find no further information on the extent of their involvement or their conclusions. Ultimately, it's not clear where John ended up or how he entered the water. Given the FBI's involvement, one can only wonder if they had their own suspicions on the disappearance. The disappearance of Matthew Green provides a cautionary tale for everyone that loves to spend time in the wilderness. This is a man that disappeared from the face of the earth and failed to leave behind a single trace or clue as to what happened to him. Matthew was 39 years old and was considered to be very intelligent. He was a high school maths teacher at the time, but he was also a very experienced climber and he did this a lot in his free time. In mid-July of 2013, Matthew was dropping his car off at an auto shop for repairs in the Mammoth Lakes area. This is a small ski town in California's Eastern Sierra bordering Yosemite National Park. This is a trip that had been successful and enjoyable up until now. He and a number of friends of his had been climbing in the area, but around the time they were planning to leave and head back to Colorado for more climbing, his car blew a head gasket. His friends still left as planned and he agreed to meet them at a Colorado mountain range. Only Matthew would never meet with his friends again. As the work on his car progressed, he sent a text to his friend which read, "I may have to spend the rest of my life here in Mammoth." The final time Matthew was heard from was when he spoke to his parents on the phone on the 16th of July 2013. The following day he was supposed to pick his car up, but he never showed up at the garage. What was found thereafter was that his campsite was left untouched, meaning that there didn't appear to have been any kind of struggle with a third party or animal. The authorities then contacted his bank and phone provider. It was realised that his credit cards hadn't been used, nor had he made contact with anyone else. There was one clue left behind at the campsite though, a couple of pages torn out from a mountaineering book which perhaps hinted at the Minarets and Ritter Range. This is a rugged mountain area in the Ansel Adams Wilderness. Even today, we're not sure if Matthew actually made it to the Minarets and his body has never been found. He never told anyone where he was going or what he was doing, so the assumption was that he was going to relax around the campsite and wait for the car, but this clearly wasn't the case. The problem this caused was actually quite major because the authorities had no earthly idea where they were even supposed to begin the search. As a result of this, the official search couldn't even begin, so instead they sent search teams on training efforts to the Minarets and Ritter Range. As well as doing their own training, the other objective was to find any kind of sign that Matthew had been there. They checked the logs but didn't find Matthew's name printed, nor did they find any physical signs either. In 2016, more than 600,000 Americans were reported missing, according to the FBI's National Crime Information Center. At the end of the year, nearly 85,000 of those cases were still active. Matthew Green is the only unsolved missing person case in Mammoth Lakes. Most people assume that Matt was a victim of some sort of climbing accident, a fall of some sort, says John Greco, Matthew's good friend and climbing partner that met him in California. But all his friends agree that he was experienced, skilled and careful in the mountains. Perhaps it didn't even cross Matthew's mind to tell anyone where he was going, and this is something we should all think about from time to time. We all have a normalcy bias, and because he was so experienced at climbing and had done so many times, the thought process for him was probably automatic and subconscious. It was probably something along the lines of, "It's normally okay, therefore it will be okay this time." Had Matthew have told anyone where he was going and what his plans were, this may have been a very different story. Matthew's loved ones and friends all spoke of how fit he was and how his love for the outdoors translated into an exceptional skill set over the years. When he was young, he became a Boy Scout and spent much time with his dad in the wilderness. This would eventually lead to Matthew spending a great deal of time in mountainous areas with his friends, camping and climbing. He was very highly regarded by everyone who knew him. More than 2 weeks after Matthew talked to his parents for the last time, Detective Hornbeck contacted Verizon for an emergency information request. Verizon concluded that Matthew's phone had been powered off for quite some time and there was no way to track the current location. The last ping Verizon registered was on July the 16th from Mammoth Mountain, and it had created a cone shape with towers in Fresno and June Lake. The Mammoth Lakes Police Department did not find any evidence of foul play, and the potential of this being a purposeful act was quickly ruled out. The Mammoth Lakes Police Department did not find any evidence of foul play, and the potential of this being a purposeful act was quickly ruled out. As mentioned previously, because Matthew hadn't told anyone of his plans, the search and rescue teams couldn't even begin the search effort. They said that there were so many trailheads within the cone area given by Verizon that it was an impossible task. This really was a desperate situation, and the entire effort was effectively blind due to a lack of information. Matthew's family hired an aerial tour company to continuously fly over the area, but this provided no help at all. Detective Hornbeck would later say, "What frustrates me the most with Matthew is he's so experienced, but he didn't tell anyone where he was going. There's nothing wrong with sending a text and saying, 'Hey, I'm going to go climb in the minarets today.' That would solve a lot of problems." It will probably never be completely clear what happened to Matthew, and despite 8 years passing now, no sign of him has ever been found. There is, however, an important lesson to be learned, and that is to make sure that at least one trusted person knows of your plans. As far as I can tell, that is pretty much the extent of the paper trail on Matthew's disappearance, so let's move on to the next one. Ruth Ann Ruppert was 49 when she disappeared from Yosemite National Park at the start of the century on the 14th of August 2000. The Sandusky Register newspaper described her as a veteran mountain climber who had ascended Mount Kilimanjaro, Mount Aconcagua and Half Dome. So you can take from that she appeared to have a lot of experience in the outdoors, and this clearly wasn't her first wilderness hiking session. On the day of her disappearance, she had planned to take part in an organised hike from Yosemite Falls to the Forester area. But unfortunately, she had an eye infection at the time and had to get it checked at the doctors right before the hike took place. Her family said that she was a bit miffed at the timings because she was very much looking forward to the hike, and the family believes that she set off on her own hike later that day. Recordnet.com provides some more information. Ruppert had made 2 previous trips to Yosemite in the past 2 years and climbed Half Dome more than once. An avid backpacker and climber, Ruppert scaled an Argentine peak December 31 to celebrate the dawn of the new millennium and made it to the top of Tanzania's Mount Kilimanjaro despite a frozen foot, her sister said. She came to Yosemite in August for a strenuous 30-mile backcountry hiking trip, an outing that figured to take 7 days. But the morning of the trip, Ruppert developed an eye infection that needed medical attention. Her trip to Yosemite Valley's medical clinic put her behind the rest of the group. Rather than try to catch up, she apparently decided to do something on her own, Ruth Ann's sister said. Whilst at Yosemite, Ruth Ann reserved the cabin for 2 days, and the article states that it's anyone's guess what happened after that because it doesn't appear that she ever stayed at the cabin. Similar to Matthew, Ruth Ann seems to have made the exact same mistake. She never told anyone of her plans, where she was going, or what she intended to do. So the problem they had now is that it was just assumed that she'd gone off on her own hike. This was never proven, though it is an understandable assumption to make. All they had to go on was that she'd missed the organised hike and felt a bit annoyed that she'd missed it because she really wanted to go. Therefore, perhaps she left on her own hike. Equally as important is the fact that, again, similar to Matthew, because she failed to mention her plans, the search and rescue effort was basically compromised from the get-go because they didn't even have a definitive location to search. However, at some point during this search, Mark Stevens, who was the park's spokesman, said that a hiker had come forward to say that he had met Ruth Ann sometime before she disappeared. He struck up a conversation with Ruth Ann, and she expressed interest in the Indian Canyon and Snow Creek Trail near North Dome. Mark said that this led the search effort to be directed to that general area, but again, no trace of her presence was found at all. Despite 21 years passing since Ruth Ann's disappearance, she's never been found, nor has any of her belongings, clothing, etc. In this instance, it's difficult to imagine that something went wrong on the trail because in all likelihood she'd have been found. This was the assumption made by the authorities, at least while searching. At first, they fully believed that if some kind of accident happened on a trail, they'd find her. Instead, we have a situation where Ruth Ann disappeared completely without a trace. None of her clothing has ever shown up, nor have any remains ever been discovered. Ultimately, it's not at all clear what happened here. Ruth Ann's disappearance does, however, provide a similar lesson to Matthew's. That is, be sure that at least one person knows where you're going. In any case, it seems at this point that we'll never have a full understanding of what happened to Ruth Ann or what took place that day. "21-year-old Sivak Simonian went missing on the 20th of October 2014 in the Kanangra Boyd National Park. At the time, Sivak was living in Bellerose, which is a suburb of Sydney. After graduating from Galston College, he began working for Dunning's warehouse retail store. According to his family and friends, he was a very happy person who loved the outdoors. One of Sivak's favourite activities was hiking alone in the national parks around the Sydney area, and as a result was an experienced outdoorsman. Sivak planned a lone hiking trip after receiving a day off work on Monday the 20th of October 2014. So he got in his car and made the 70-mile journey west from his home to the national park. This was his favourite place to hike, and he had done so many times before, only this time would be different. Sivak was never seen again, and to this day his body has never been found. He was due back to work on the 21st of October, but he never arrived. Initially, it was thought that he must have booked multiple days off work and someone had just forgotten to log it correctly. However, this didn't turn out to be the case. 2 days had passed, and on the 23rd of October he was reported missing and his family began to search. The following day, Sivak's father, Masses, discovered his car at the end of a dirt road in the national park. This finding would set the search in motion. Law enforcement reported to the car and stated that it had not been tampered with and was locked, as you would expect. The search for Sivak was massive and sparked an unbelievable response. On November the 11th, the Central Western Daily reported, "Police from Chifley Local Area Command and Police Rescue have been coordinating the search for the 21-year-old, utilising resources from the local police and specialist police force from the rescue squad, the dog squad unit and police Irving, as well as personnel from National Parks and Wildlife Service, ambulance paramedics and volunteers from the State Emergency Service, Rural Fire Service, Volunteer Rescue Association and the Bushwalker Wilderness Rescue Squad." Despite an extensive search that lasted for 18 days with every resource available thrown at it, they didn't find a single trace of Sivak. On September the 12th, 2017, when speaking to Sivak's brother, Sassoon, the Sydney Morning Herald reported, "I had confidence in my younger brother. He was an experienced bushwalker and I trusted his ability to overcome any challenges that may have been thrown his way. After spotting his car, we thought we were much closer to finding answers. I was confident that if Sivak was in the national park, he would be found. He had the skills to survive for weeks." As the days passed and the search intensified, still nothing, not a single clue. The lead volunteers were baffled as to how the biggest search in the region's history did not uncover any leads. My dad agreed, adding that Sivak would have been able to make himself known if he was lost and with his experience was not likely to have stumbled into danger. The question must be asked, where is Sivak? Why couldn't search dogs, helicopters and hundreds of searchers find this man? What exactly took place here and what happened to him? What do you think? Cecilia Devine was 42 years old when she disappeared in very early September of 2018. Cecilia originated in Newcastle, Australia and was a talented singer that performed in venues across the country. She was last seen on the 6th of September 2018 when a CCTV camera captured her leaving a hotel on Katoomba Street, located in the town of Katoomba. For those that don't know, Katoomba, depending on who you ask, is either inside the Blue Mountains National Park or at the very least is right on the border. Nationalparks.nsw.gov.au states that the Katoomba area is in the heart of the Blue Mountains National Park. So according to them, it appears that the town is inside the park. On the CCTV footage, Cecilia was seen wearing a bright yellow cardigan, black trousers, a bright orange handbag and was without footwear. It's not clear why she wasn't wearing any shoes, but CCTV captured her visiting some shops and buying some food, a scarf, a jumper and shoes. It's important to note at this stage that her brother stated that Cecilia suffered from bipolar disorder, which is crucial to keep in mind here. He described her as a person that loved making music and was probably far too easygoing. He said that she loved being social and had a great social life, which was probably bolstered by her natural vocal talent and constantly performing and being around others. Her brother said that she would assimilate with anyone and was very easy to get along with. It's not clear when or how her mental issues began, but Cecilia herself earlier stated that she thought that these episodes began when she lived in New York City in 2013. The CCTV footage on the 6th of September was the last time that Cecilia was seen, but she was actually reported missing by those close to her the day prior on the 5th. It's not clear what led them to do this, but I can only imagine it was because they hadn't been able to get in touch with her for a period of time that was out of character for Cecilia. After the CCTV footage, the Australian authorities had absolutely no idea where she'd gone next or what had happened to her. But 6 months later, her completely unclothed body would be discovered by staff working in the water treatment facility in the Blue Mountains Upper Cascade Creek Dam near Katoomba. Upon this discovery, the police immediately felt that a third party must have been involved and were treating the passing as suspicious because they had absolutely no idea how Cecilia could have ended up there. However, after the police began the investigation and searched the dense bushland and dam many times, they could not determine a cause of passing. I find that to be quite peculiar because I think that could imply that she was found without any injuries. Normally, when the missing are found like this and injuries are present, it's normally mentioned and the cause of passing is quite clear, but in this case, the police stated clearly that they couldn't determine an obvious cause. Detective Inspector Scott McAlpine, who was working the case, stated that we just don't know what the cause of passing was. Scott continued on and said that it appeared that the body had been there for a fair while and that the area was completely closed off. He said that it's not open to the public because it's a catchment area for the Sydney Water Authority. It seems that the authorities weren't sure as to how Cecilia managed to reach the dam. Cecilia's brothers said that they weren't sure why she was in Katoomba at the time or how she travelled to the town. Unfortunately, the paper trail goes cold after this and it appears that no conclusions have ever been reached as to how she ended up there. 9news.com.au describes Cecilia's disappearance as a true mountain mystery. Some questions need to be posed at this point. Firstly, and quite obviously, it would be nice to know why Cecilia was in Katoomba that day, but it doesn't appear that the reasoning was ever discovered. When the CCTV footage captured Cecilia, she was walking barefoot in the town. Why? The authorities stated that they had no idea what the cause of passing was. Does this actually mean that she was uninjured and didn't drown? And if that is the case, then did she pass away before reaching that location? Of course, I'm no expert when it comes to analysing the cause of passing or anything like that, but one would assume evidence would be left behind in the lungs of that possibility. Just to reiterate that point, I do find it unusual that the official position was that they had no idea how or why she had passed away. In my mind, and of course this is speculation and nothing more, but it seems as though there must have been a third party present in this scenario. Just how in the world did she reach her final destination which was completely closed off? Though one would assume that there would be some evidence of foul play left behind if this was the case, what happened to Cecilia Devine? I've had to come back and edit this in, but I came across one final report of this incident on the 4th of September 2019 by the newcastleherald.com.au. They added this. Strikeforce Ecking was formed shortly after the finding of Cecilia's body, who were tasked to investigate the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Strikeforce Ecking's Detective Sergeant James Allen said investigators needed the public's help. We've established some strong leads into Cecilia Devine's disappearance and passing in recent months, but there are still many unanswered questions, James said. We are confident that there are people in the community who have information. For obvious reasons, the authorities didn't release any information in regards to their leads or what they were comprised of. But it has been 8 months since that report and no further information has presented itself. Which brings into question just how strong those leads were, but only time will tell. I'll keep an eye on this one and will update with any further information if it comes to light. I'd just like to take the time to thank you for watching, and a big thank you to the patrons who've been running around and disappearing on the screen. If you found the video interesting, then please do leave a like, hit the bell, and subscribe if you haven't already. If not, then feel free to leave a dislike. I'm just looking for your honest opinion either way. I hope that you've had a great day, or evening, depending on where you are, and I'll see you in the next one. Be safe guys. Peace.